Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening, whether it's on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or Review Podcast. There are days like today where you really just don't know where to begin, and sometimes the best thing to do is to just dive right in and let the conversation go where it will. On the 24th anniversary of 9/11, we're here again, stunned in some respects that we're at war, only this time with each other. Like many of you yesterday, I was out doing my routine. Maybe you were at work, maybe you were running errands, maybe you were picking the kids up, maybe you were taking them to, football practice, soccer practice, whatever. Like many of you, I was just out doing my work. I was heading to a networking event, actually, and I got word. And the way I got word of a shooting in Utah, and honestly, you have to even delineate that because there was actually a mass school shooting as well not long after that. The word I got came via a text message, and the text message was a simple text from my right-wing colleague, Austin Rhodes, who snarkily tweeted, "Sounds like another, quote, white supremacist has opened fire." I say snarkily because Austin Rhodes, a conservative radio commentator back in my hometown of Augusta, Georgia, always enjoys pouncing on an opportunity to dismiss what is statistically relevant, statistically valid, that the vast and overwhelming majority of mass shootings in this country occur at the hands of a white male. And that white nationalism, according to federal law enforcement data, decades of it, points to white supremacy being a leading cause of domestic terrorism. It's inarguable. However, if there are 2 trans mass shootings, suddenly there is a trans mental health problem. If there's a mass shooter who is non-white male, well, there you go, another white national. It's sort of like our internal code to each other. That's how I, nonetheless, found out about Charlie Kirk being shot. And let me just say, being someone who I sense, I guess, I can say dabbles in the same sort of conversation that a Charlie Kirk does, I found myself unsure how to react. I viscerally disagreed with just about everything that came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth or through blogs or tweets or what have you. But I've never believed in political violence. I've never believed that someone should be gunned down for their beliefs, even if those beliefs foster an environment where it's easy for someone to be gunned down. Charlie Kirk, very pro-Second Amendment. This happened in an open carry state where I'm guessing it's not unusual for someone to have a hunting rifle sitting in the back of their truck. It's in plain sight in the window, right on the rack. To be questioned by that. That I'm not saying he asked for it, obviously. I'm a fan of the First Amendment the way many on the right are of the Second. But here's where we differ. I actually believe that absolutionism for both is dangerous. Yesterday, the political discourse lost a voice in 31-year-old Charlie Kirk. It occurred in that open carry state on one of the college campuses he'd joked to his followers he'd go to so that they didn't have to. Because college campuses are the scourge, and here's where some of his borderline anti-Semitism came in. A lot of Jewish money went in to prop up these liberal institutions, et cetera. He once, and now infamously said, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. His First Amendment right to say what he did met with his belief that the Second Amendment be embraced in such an absolutionist manner, that it might not even be at all alarming that someone on a college campus was carrying a hunting rifle. Our right to speak freely is never free of societal consequence, and while I'd never champion political violence or applaud its use, I repeat, our right to speak freely is never free of societal consequence. Not that he asked for what he received yesterday. We live in a society awash in guns, a society hyper-divided by voices like Charlie Kirk, led by arguably the most divisive American president in history. Honestly, if you think about it, why anyone is stunned today at what occurred yesterday, it's sort of beyond me because the ingredients were there. Nonetheless, his wife Erica and their 2 young daughters grieve. I'm certain they saw a side of Charlie that not many of us did. And that's unfortunate. I say that because the Charlie Kirk, who surely loved his wife and children, who surely filtered any cross thoughts about them to them, showed very little regard for those he didn't see eye to eye with or chose to bandwagon demonize, whether it's black pilots or the LGBTQIA+. I sometimes want to believe that shock talkers are putting on an act because it's quite lucrative for many to parrot talking points on cable TV, talk radio, and the podcast platforms. I don't know Charlie's heart to weigh in on that, but I will say he's every bit as much a victim of the polarized society we now live in, thanks in large part to the vitriolic trailblazers before and beside him. The same president who adorned a Medal of Freedom on the likes of Rush Limbaugh adored Charlie Kirk too. And I'll get to him and his response in a minute. Whereas I'd love to hope this moment provides a moment of reflection for everyone to dial down the amplified rhetoric, I'm afraid this will only ratchet up the rancor. We're seeing it already. All the more reason for me to believe the reason we can't find the shooter is because maybe he's a skilled, perhaps Russian marksman sent in to wedge an even greater divide between us. And our Second and First Amendment absolutionists gave them the opportunity. It's actually on that note. Let me start with that part of the conversation. This from Brendan Cole at Newsweek. Russian officials, real quick with the response here. Russian officials allied with Vladimir Putin have responded to the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk by blaming the left and Ukraine supporters for political violence in the United States. Interesting. We haven't found the person involved, but they're already blaming the left and Ukraine. They're doing no less, honestly, minus the Ukraine part, than what our own president did last night. Again, I'll get to him in a minute. But first, let's follow this story. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev and Kirill Dmitriev, a key Kremlin negotiator with the Trump administration over Ukraine, weighed in on the shooting of Kirk, founder of the right-leaning youth organization Turning Point USA. Kirk was popular in Russia for his anti-NATO stance and criticism of Ukraine's President Zelensky. Medvedev linked the murder to supporters of Kiev, while Dmitriev reposted a video showing alleged leftists, quote, in full celebration mode over Kirk getting shot. Now, if anyone knows political violence or political assassinations covertly done, it's Vladimir Putin. It's Russia under Vladimir Putin. Interesting that they popped out right away with a response. Is it not? President Trump didn't really sound all that different when he posted a video from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
To my great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight, all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there's never been anyone who was so respected by youth. Charlie was also a man of deep, deep faith, and we take comfort in the knowledge that he is now at peace with God in heaven. Our prayers are with his wife, Erica, the 2 young, beloved children, and his entire family, who he loved more than anything in the world. We ask God to watch over them in this terrible hour of heartache and pain. This is a dark moment for America. Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. On campuses nationwide, he championed his ideas with courage, logic, humor, and grace. It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible.
That man clearly lacks self-awareness. Hello? Do you follow yourself on the Truth Social platform?
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals.
He said as much or worse about people who just simply live in Chicago.
This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
And maybe could if we were led by someone with an ounce of empathy for those with whom he or she disagrees with. Instead, we have Donald Trump.
My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country.
That, in and of itself, is a pretty chilling statement. First of all, we don't know who perpetrated the act. We don't know who purchased the weapon. We don't know that anyone funded anything. And yet, that statement alone indicates that there will be some use of this event potentially by this administration to go after political enemies under the guise that they're under some large manhunt and seeking to disarm fiscally organizations that they assume or suspect may have been somehow involved. Put an asterisk by that.
From the attack on my life in Butler, Pennsylvania last year.
Yeah, by the way, what is the latest on that investigation where the son of a Trump supporter did take a shot at you, sir?
Which killed a husband and father, to the attacks on ICE agents, to the vicious murder of a healthcare executive in the streets of New York, to the shooting of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and 3 others.
What about the death of the Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband and their dog, and the shooting of another Minnesota state lawmaker who just so happened to not be Republicans? Where is that in your statement? The flags at the White House were not lowered for that.
Radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives.
January 6th caused people to lose their lives as well.
Tonight, I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died. The values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law,
said the convicted felon,
and the patriotic devotion and love of God. Charlie was the best of America, and the monster who attacked him was attacking our whole country. An assassin tried to silence him with a bullet, but he failed, because together we will ensure that his voice, his message, and his legacy will live on for countless generations to come. Today, because of this heinous act, Charlie's voice has become bigger and grander than ever before, and it's not even close. May God bless his memory, may God watch over his family, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
That is not a speech from the Oval Office that would have united the country, that would have given a proper response to allow those who sought to mourn and those who sought to reflect. And there are those who seek to reflect who don't seek to mourn, and there are those who seek to mourn who don't seek to reflect. However, that statement last night did absolutely nothing to bring the country together in a pivotal moment, and that's why we live in such a dangerous time right now. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Near universal condemnation from Democrats up and down the federal, state, local ladder. Yesterday afternoon, Senator Elizabeth Warren confronted in the parking lot as she was leaving an office building. I guess she was leaving the Senate building yesterday. Here was her response to the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Violence is never the answer. This is just wrong. And my heart goes out to his family, to his friends. But we just cannot be a country that turns to violence when we disagree with people. We just can't.
What can Congress do about it, Senator?
Well, one thing Congress can do is gun safety. And every time there's a killing, the Republicans say this is not the time to talk about gun safety. And yet we have to. As a nation, we have more gun deaths than most other nations, and we don't keep our children, our friends, our neighbors safe by just putting ordinary gun safety rules in place. You know, I just want to say this coming from Massachusetts. If the rest of the country would just follow the rules we follow in Massachusetts, we could reduce fatalities all over this country. And plenty of people who are hunters and who use guns for sport still have lots of activities in Massachusetts. But at least we make it a little tougher to use guns for harming other human beings.
What do you say to people who are saying the Democrats need to lower the temperatures?
Oh, please. Right. Why don't you start with the President of the United States?
Bingo.
Right? And every ugly meme he has posted and every ugly word. He is the leader of this nation. And I think that when he's posting things like he did just a couple of days ago, trying to show an entire city on fire, and a reference to helicopters, in effect, throwing people out of helicopters and showing himself as some kind of big chest-beating threat, then I just don't want to hear this from the Republicans.
Do you think politicians on both sides have a role to play here, though, in trying to turn the rhetoric down?
Yeah, I think what we have to say is, A, violence is not the answer, and we are willing to take steps so that violence in this country is not so lethal. Do we have a single Republican who will stand up and join us following the school shooting out in Denver at the same time? School shootings happen every single day. They have become commonplace in this country. It's hard now to actually get attention when someone has been mowed down with a gun, and Congress could change that and should change that.
I just asked Senator Cassidy that same question before you, and he said Congress can't change the heart of a man.
You can change whether or not they have a lethal weapon in their hands. And the likelihood that they will be able to kill another person or to kill themselves goes up if they have a lethal weapon. Those are the facts. And Republicans want to turn their backs on that because it is more politically expedient. But they are not making anybody safer.
A lot of people are saying that political violence has no place in our country, but it clearly does have some place in our country.
It's a fact of life now, yeah.
Is it just a fact of life now?
Well, I don't want it to be a fact of life, and that's what we have to keep saying. We have to keep saying no violence, but we also need to back it up with actions. And backing it up with actions means just taking some modest steps for gun safety. And remember here, most of America agrees with us on modest steps on gun safety, on things like background checks. This is what America wants to do, to protect our children. And yet, the Republican Party, just as they bend a knee to Donald Trump, bends a knee to a gun industry that continues to make money by stirring everyone up and making sure that everyone has access to every possible lethal weapon. And that puts all of us at risk. It puts our children at risk.
Yes.
It puts leaders at risk.
Yes.
And that's a real mistake for our country.
Senator Warren, do you feel safe given all of this violence?
How can anybody feel safe today? I worry when I send my grandchildren off to school. Who doesn't? If you're alive and breathing in the United States right now, you understand that the risks have simply escalated. And the United States Congress could act, and so far simply refuses. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's I think a measured response, and one that from all I can tell anyway, has been near universal, at least amongst elected or formerly elected Democratic leadership. Of course, there are those on the left in the social media sphere who are celebrating or taking no moment to grieve or to reflect, and that is their right as well. That is their First Amendment right, correct? And there could be societal. In fact, there has been societal consequence. Matthew Dowd, a contributor with NBC News, MSNBC, lost his job. A reporter who texted a state lawmaker in Florida if he still believed in open carry on campus, she lost her job. All of that happening within hours of Charlie Kirk's assassination. A year ago, a presidential candidate was nearly killed in the same manner, and we were asked to dial down the rhetoric. Those of us on the left don't believe we amplified it to begin with, but we're looking to our folks on the right and saying, okay, you first.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Yeah, so political violence isn't the way to win hearts and minds politically. I say that, and yet, again, we're led by a president who likes to send National Guard troops, armed National Guard troops, into cities, thinking that a short burst of muscle flexing to quell crime is somehow going to solve crime when we all know that root causation isn't being addressed. Not that that's necessarily political violence, but it's the threat of ... Listen, we have no idea who perpetrated yesterday's assassination on Charlie Kirk, to know what that person's motives were. And again, for their part, Democrats at every level of governance have condemned the attack and the notion of political violence as a tool of any use. We do know what drives our responses, though. And maybe it's the wisdom of being a 51-year-old who's raced to socials to say something funny, snarky, and or witty before, who'd failed to do so and got called for it, that kept me from saying anything for a few hours yesterday. It really did. I was sort of stunned, almost immobile. I had a networking event to get to, so I did that and spent 45 minutes or so meeting with folks in the business community here in Metro Atlanta, and we didn't talk much about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Here's the thing. A piece of me does grieve. Not so much for him, but for us. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do feel for his wife and children. Their grief is unimaginable to so many of us, except to those who've lost children to mass shootings at schools or those who've lost loved ones to mass shootings at churches, the mall, their job, or a night out. Those who understand the fear, the loss, the suffering in Gaza, those who know the fear, the loss, the suffering in Ukraine. But yeah, my heart does ache for Erica, Charlie's wife, and their two children, and those who loved and were loved by Charlie Kirk. I'm sure to them he was a kind and loving person. To them, the world is a better place when we don't limit that love, compassion, and empathy solely to those in our inner circle. And that's where I believe our response to his gruesome assassination honestly and truly begin to diverge. It was the same Charlie Kirk who said,
I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
I mean, Google is your friend. Empathy is not a New Age term. It came about in the early 1900s and modeled after a German term, Einfühlung, which was coined in 1858 by German philosopher Rudolf Lotz as a translation of Greek, empathia, which meant passion, state of emotion. Anyway, this revisionary eulogizing of Charlie Kirk is, I think this has a lot to do with why we are as divided as we are as a country, because we literally don't see things in the same lens. We can walk out and see a blue sky and sunshine, and one of us will say, it's a beautiful day, and the other will say, this is heinous, this is brutal. When Charlie Kirk says,
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
That's not an attack on black people, according to conservatives. That's an attack on DEI. Y'all, we have the most unqualified man to ever serve in the office of the presidency, serving in the office of the presidency in his second term of the last 3. You're telling me that guy with his mental acuity passed Wharton? The Wharton School, y'all. That is, it's not a diploma mill. I'm a member of the Alphabet Mafia, obviously, and so the things that he said about transgenderism. There are those that don't blink when you read back some of the things he says. I think it's a mental disease, and we've allowed it to all of a sudden become an identity. I think there are 2 sexes, 0 genders, and unlimited personalities. And what we used to call a personality disorder, now we call it gender disorder, that we treat with body treatment when it should be brain treatment. Why would someone not be offended by that? People used to say the very same thing about just being gay. So transgenderism, he says, is a brain problem, not a body problem, and that's how we should go about it. I mean, how many transgender people did he actually know? Yesterday, I wrestled with how do I respond to this? How do I prepare for this on this show? My guide initially was, well, how did those who do what I do here, but on the right, react when a Minnesota lawmaker and her spouse and dog were killed? I couldn't find worthy examples. And again, I just can't escape that Charlie Kirk died on a college campus in an open carry state. His ideology saw it. It doesn't excuse anything. It doesn't make it right. But before anyone tries to lecture me or you or anyone else on their reaction to Charlie Kirk being killed, be sure to check their timelines to see what their reaction was to that assassination. Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, along with the shooting of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. If you can't find a reaction to it, that's telling. But then see what they said about Paul Pelosi's attack. Remember what Charlie Kirk did in the aftermath of Paul Pelosi's attack? He encouraged his faithful to be patriots and contribute to bailing out Paul Pelosi's attacker. What about the plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan? If someone's going to castigate you for your response, whatever it is, to Charlie Kirk's passing, see how they reacted to that kidnapping plot. Look to see if they were indifferent, have been indifferent, are indifferent to the tens of thousands of civilians lost in Gaza. You want to go all the way back to January 6, 2021. That's fine. The thing is, the caveat on that is, there was near universal condemnation of the events of January 6th from even many ardent Republicans. So you may have a hard time finding that eventually the coalescing of the Republicans around the dismissivism of January 6th could be hard to pinpoint on one social media. But if the person wagging their finger at you was sympathetic, can I say empathetic, to those who stormed the Capitol, to those who were arrested, to those who were charged and convicted. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman in Georgia's 14th District, showed a lot of empathy, sympathy for those who had been jailed, the J6ers, right? And who pardoned them as soon as he was sworn in. So, to those who want to finger wag at anyone's response to Charlie Kirk's passing, check out their reactions to all of those key events just in the last 4 years. If you come up empty, you're under absolutely no obligation to take a bit of grief from them over your indifference to the passing of Charlie Kirk. It sounds cold, maybe. Maybe I'm just I'm being mean-spirited, or hey, say what you will. That's just where we are as a society. We have been indifferent to innocent lives lost on a near daily basis due to mass shootings. We've even tried to make something political out of something horrific. The killing of the woman, the violent stabbing of a woman on a train in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, at the hand of not just what the right calls a violent criminal, the system failed, blah, 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 blah. The man has schizophrenia. He has suffered from mental illness for a long time. His family has sought whatever treatments available to them, whatever the law allowed, and we live in a country that doesn't provide much for those who suffer from mental illness, let alone the families who really seek to do all they can to help that person with mental illness, hence our homelessness issue in this country. There just aren't many resources to avail a family or the person with that mental illness of the treatment that they need. And so innocent people suffer as a result. That's just where we are as a country right now. This is the Ron Show on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. All right, final segment of today's Ron Show. The interesting thing is, I think the lead story today politically would be excerpts coming out from a forthcoming Kamala Harris book that has a lot of Biden White House people pissed, and we'll get to that. I want to finish with something that I saw that came out of Newsweek. Theo Berman reporting here. The shooting of Charlie Kirk in Utah had the hallmarks of a professional assassination, according to several security experts. Remember earlier I'd said something about how interesting that the Russians seem to have something to say about this assassination, and immediately pointing to leftists and Ukraine. It was them. Huh. It's just an interesting way to respond, right? Not just, the usual thoughts and prayers and or whatever. They weighed in nearly immediately. Anyway, Theo Berman at Newsweek. The prominent conservative activist, who was 31, was struck in the neck by a single gunshot as he delivered a speech to a large crowd on campus at Utah Valley University in Orem on Wednesday. He collapsed and was rushed to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. Analysts point to the firing of a single shot and a pre-established escape route as evidence that the shooting had been carefully planned. Kirk was shot as he was addressing the crowd from an open tent on a stage at Orem at about 12:20 p.m. local time on Wednesday. Former FBI agent Stuart Kaplan said the shooter likely put a lot of preparation into the attack, telling Fox News' Jesse Waters, "This assassination, different to the attack on Trump back in Butler, Pennsylvania, was a very well-planned, very well-orchestrated plot that was put in motion days before." He's surmising that, of course, but he said this individual had a plan of escape to elude detection of being out on a rooftop and also being able to evade and elude key law enforcement. This assassination of Charlie Kirk, to me, is indicative of a professional hit, and I'm not so sure we're quickly going to be able to apprehend this individual without some luck. Kaplan pointed to the shooter's use of only one shot and immediate disappearance as a sign of careful preparation ahead of the attack. The shot that was taken to immediately incapacitate Charlie Kirk, and so this was not some amateur who just got up on a rooftop. This seems the earmark of a professional that got up onto this rooftop well in advance. He was clearly undetected, and there was no indication that anyone saw him. After that, one single shot was taken. This is someone who had some experience, some level of sophistication to have mapped out exactly how this was going to go down. Former Republican New York State Senator and Homeland Security Advisor Michael Balboni made a similar point, telling Fox News, "It's an incredibly chaotic scene on a college campus. Hundreds and hundreds of people there right immediately afterwards." He added that a rifle sound was heard, and yet nobody was able to identify an individual, which most likely means that the individual was shooting from concealment and maybe had some way to suppress or to hide the flash of the gun, and again, indicating that this is a sophisticated individual. One shot hitting the target from 200 meters away and then escaping without anybody seeing them, those are the hallmarks of a professional. Again, I'm going to point out that we had Russian officials nearly immediately releasing statements. Who benefits most from a divided America? Those outside. our borders. That is no different a philosophy than that of one Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, who attacked us on this day 24 years ago. And I just can't escape the irony of that realization as we discuss what happened yesterday, today. Again, I do what I do here 5 days a week, and I am nobody, okay? I mean, if I got capped on the street today, there's not going to be anywhere near the reaction, even locally, as there is for Charlie Kirk. So I understand folks who are fearful about their First Amendment rights in the face of violence, political violence, for simply disagreeing with someone. I'm a white gay liberal who lives in the South. Are you kidding me? And yet I do, in some respects, believe myself to be doing something similar to Charlie, although I would argue without the sort of bigotry that he exhibited. Bigotry towards political ideologies, not really, I don't consider, that's something that Austin Rhodes and we texted each other about yesterday. He believes that I am no less bigoted than Charlie Kirk, except I'm not bigoted towards anybody because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their nationality, their religion, faith, or lack thereof. I don't know that I peddle in bigotry. I could argue peddle in ideological, political differences. And even then, I'd like to think in my near 3 years in doing this show that I've been able to exhibit the ability to find common ground, to actually even say, I think we could find some common ground in some conservative principles, except for the fact that we can't seem to get there because of ideological divides or partisan, party-driven divides. I mean, for example, I too would love the concept of a limited government, especially right now. I mean, where are my limited government? Where are my Second Amendment, limited government fetishists who said that they were going to be here with those guns that are their God-given right to carry in the face of governmental overreach? Where are they? The concept of limited government, it's a key concept in the GOP and conservatism and libertarianism even. I believe limited government, however, is a white privilege, a white male heterosexual privilege, because that is the only subset in this country that can get by with limited government. When you have the benefits of just about everything from day one in your existence, while those who are not white, male, heterosexual, native born, have to rely on, in many cases, governmental programs to try and undo those impediments that exist because you're not white, male, heterosexual, native born. I mean, I'd love to meet the limited government folks in the middle there. Let's eliminate the need for any sort of government agency that exists due to the impediments that exist for those who don't have the same God-given rights the minute they're born. I mean, am I fearful I'll lose my life because of my opinion? I mean, I guess maybe. I've lived in the South all my life. I'm an outspoken progressive liberal. I'm a gay man. So I guess I've lived with that fear deep-seated in the back of my head all this time. But I don't peddle in the sort of hatred that drives out animus in people just based on innate characteristics. Charlie Kirk called Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson a DEI hire. Charlie Kirk couldn't cut it at a local community college. And I don't take that lightly. I don't say that lightly. I couldn't cut it at the University of Georgia. I was distracted. I was coming out. I was enjoying social life and trying to work, and really took more interest in my work than I did my scholastic work, unfortunately. And that's why I'm a 28th year sophomore at the University of Georgia. He maintained a watch list of alleged left-wing faculty at American universities. I mean, that's creepy. He amplified the big lie, baseless claims that the 2020 election was stolen. I keep coming back to internally, the letters FAFO. Around, find out, right? And that's, it's crude. It's not empathetic. But it is sort of what potentially led to his demise. Is it too soon to say that? Are we not properly paying respect to the fallen? I don't know. I know this. He was a 31-year-old man who led a movement, who was the face of Turning Point USA, which in and of itself has done a lot of harmful things to the mental wellness of people of color, the LGBTQI+, the immigrant, all in the name of, let's just call it what it is, white nationalism. You can get on a plane and look at the pilot and wonder quietly to yourself, are they qualified? If, for example, I don't know, they look 14, or maybe they look tired, or they look super old, like, I don't know, say your 80s. But to put it into the ethos that you wonder about their qualifications because of their color, not because they're black or brown or female, but because you think that there's some sort of institutional bias that gave them a leg up despite not being qualified. That's where you run into some otherism, whatever the ism is. Again, pretending that there hasn't been systemic, sometimes codified, bias that has given rise to highly unqualified white people. What is it? Friend of the show, Melita Easters, calls them stale, pale males. Pretending that hasn't long existed before affirmative action, before DEI, is, well, notable, at the very least. Laughable, if you ask me. He and his brand and the MAGA brand of conservatism has fought ruthlessly to cover our nation's history that gives light to that sort of bias and imbalance and leg up that has long existed, while also bristling at the notion that there should be any recourse to right that imbalance, that lack of equity, that lack of equality for so long. I just had a guest on yesterday, Shavonda Miles. We were talking about the plight of black women who are disproportionately facing employment woes in this, let's call it what it is, recession, because of the rhetoric, the rancor of a Charlie Kirk, of a Donald Trump, of a J.D. Vance. And no, of course, it doesn't permit us to be gleeful or glib at his passing. But as I've said throughout much of this show, there are those who are going to be shocked and horrored and feel personally attacked by what happened to Charlie Kirk. And to that I would say, hear us out. Hear why those of us who are indifferent or can only be empathetic to those who lost him and not to his loss necessarily. Hear why that is and maybe give some consideration to it, because not doing so and calling out political division when we don't even know who the perpetrator was just seems a bit premature, does it not? And that's really all I have to say about the passing of Charlie Kirk and those who mourn his loss and those of us who don't. That will do it for today's Ron Show. Lots more to touch on. We've got a Kamala Harris book forthcoming, and the excerpts already have people talking on the left. We'll do that tomorrow, and more, of course. Show airs 9 a.m., 5 p.m. weekdays on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Show notes, as always, at RonShowATL.com. Take care.